Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I will talk about the human placenta. At the end of the lectures, you know about development of the placenta, formations of the primary, secondary, and tertiary villi, formations of an outer cytotrophoblast shell, describe formations of the cotyledons, explain a full-term placenta. After the implantations of the blastocyst in the anteriorly or the posteriorly wall of the uterine bodies at the first week. The development of the placenta starts by the formations of the villous structures of the trophoblast as following. The first, formations of the primary villi. The primary villi at the second week. In the second week, the cytotrophoblast of the blastocyst proliferate to form a cellular columnar that are covered by syncytial. These columnar are called the primary villi. Cytotrophoblast covered by the syncytial. This is called the primary villi. Now, secondary villi at the third week. The primary in the second week, secondary villi at the third week. Now, the extra embryonic somatopleuric mesoderm of the chorionic plate penetrate the primary villi, those forming the secondary villi. The secondary villi grow more in the decidual mucosa of the uterine. You can know the somatopleuric mesoderm on the chorionic plate penetrate, you can see, the primary villi forming the secondary villi. Now, formations of the tertiary villi. At the end of the third weeks, capillary blood vessels develop into the extra embryonic mesoderm of the secondary villi, those forming the tertiary or the definitive placental villi. You can see this is the blood vessels develop in the extra embryonic mesoderm. This is the extra embryonic mesoderm, and this is the blood vessels develop in the extra embryonic mesoderm of the secondary villi and forming the tertiary or definitive placental villi. Tertiary blood vessels develop within the mesodermal or mesenchymal core. Now the embryo-placental circulations beginning to the capillaries in the tertiary villi connecting with the blood vessels of the somatic extra-embryonic mesoderm of the chorionic plate, and the blood vessels of the chorionic plate connecting with the blood vessels of the connecting stalk. The blood vessels of the connecting stalk connecting with the blood vessels of the intra-embryonic embryo and establish the embryo-placental circulations. Again, the blood vessels of the tertiary villi connecting with the blood vessels of the chorionic plate, the blood vessels of the chorionic plate connecting with the blood vessels of the connecting stalk, the blood vessels of the connecting stalk connecting with the intra-embryonic blood vessels. These circulations supplies the embryo after the heart beating in the 4th week of the development. Now, the formations of the outer cytotrophoblastic shell. At the end of the 3rd weeks, the cytotrophoblast of the tertiary villi penetrate more inside the uterine mucosa, and then the cytotrophoblast cells of the adjacent villi become connecting together, forming a thin shell of cytotrophoblastic cells covered all the implanted embryo. This outer cytotrophoblastic shell stabilized the implantations firmly. The endometrial mucosa functioning for implantations is called the decidua. The villi project from the chorionic plate called the stem villi or the anchoring villi. إذن هذا البروجكت from the chorionic plate is called the anchoring villi or stem villi. الstem villi branching called free villi or a terminal villi. These villi grow into the lacuna space which are filled with the maternal. You can see this is the anchoring villi or stem villi, and you can see this is the branching forming to the free villi or terminal villi. These villi grow into the lacuna space which are filled with the الماتيرنال. At the third month, the villi at the embryonic pole grow, forming the chorionic frondosome. Chorionic frondosome, you can see at the embryonic pole. While villi at the embryonic pole degenerate to forming the chorionic leaf, or is called a smooth chorionic leaf. The mucosal decidual at the chorionic frondosome is called the decidua basalis, or is called a decidual plate. Decidual plate that is formed of large compact decidual cells loaded with a lipid and a glycogen. Now at the third month, the decidual at the smooth chorionic leaf called the decidua capsularis. This is the chorionic leaf, and this is the mucosa or chorionic. Is called the decidua capsularis. With the enlargement of the gestational sac, the uterine cavity is obliterated by the gestational sac, so that there will be a fusion between the decidua capsularis with the mucosa at the decidua paritalis. Decidua paritalis, located on the opposite side of the uterine, you can see. And after this fusion, the decidua capsularis degenerating, resulting in the fusion of the chorionic leaf with the decidua paritalis. Okay. راح يصير عندنا فيوج ما بين الديسيجوا capsularis and الديسيجوا paritalis. الديسيجوا paritalis الميوكوزا that the opposite of the uterus. After this fusion, the decidua capsularis degenerate, resulting in the fusion of the chorionic leaf with the decidua paritalis. Now, thinning of the villous walls. At the fourth month, some of the cytotrophoblastic cells and the extra-embryonic mesoderm of the tertiary villi disappear. And so the fetal and the maternal blood separated only by syncytium and the endothelium of the vessels. لو نشوف بالsecondary villus, this is the mesoderm core, and this is the cytotrophoblast and surrounded by syncytium. Here in the tertiary villi, you can see some of the cytotrophoblast. This is the cytotrophoblast, and the extra embryonic mesoderm this is the connective tissue disappear. ايش راح يبقى؟ راح نلاحظ انه بالفيتال and الماتيرنال blood البلاد تكون عادة هو surrounded بالاندوثيليال cells الفلاتند cells وفقط راح تكون بعد منه عندنا بالسنسيشيوم surrounded إذا separated only by syncytium and the endothelial of vessels. You can see here cytotrophoblastic, syncytium and the connective tissue of the extraembryonic mesoderm. هذا بالسكندري. لكن من يصير الفورث month راح نلاحظ انه some of the cytotrophoblast cells and extraembryonic mesoderm of the tertiary villi disappear. وراح نلاحظ انه الفيتال and maternal blood تكون separated only by the syncytium and the endothelium of vessels. Also, pieces of the syncytium or villi break off inside the intervillous lacunar space is called the syncytial node. Resulting more thinning of the villous wall to improving the functions of the exchange. Okay, you can see this is the syncytial node. The syncytial node degenerating in the maternal blood at the intervillous space without producing any clinical features of the immune rejections. This is the maternal blood. Also, at the beginning of the fourth month, the placenta is formed by the chorionic frondosome, representing the fetal part, and the decidua basalis, representing the maternal part. The amniotic cavity enlarged to fill the extraembryonic chorionic cavity. This is the amniotic cavity and this is the chorionic cavity. The amniotic cavity enlarged to fill the extraembryonic chorionic cavity, and this is followed by fused of the amniotic membrane with the extra embryonic chorionic plate to form the amniochorionic membrane. Now this is called the amniochorionic membrane that surrounded the developing fetus. Now, the formations of the cotyledons. During the fourth and the fifth month, many septa project into the intervillous space. This is the intervillous space, and this is the septa project. It's called the decidua septa. This septa divided the placenta into many compartments is called the cotyledons. هذا الجزء نسميه cotyledons. الكوتيليدونز عادة تتكون بالبلاسنتا about 5 to 20. The septa do not penetrating deeply to reach the chorionic plate. This is the chorionic plate, and not penetrating. نشوفها uncompleted ما تصل للنهاية. And therefore the intervillous space are continuous between each other. هذه المنطقة اللي هي الوردية راح تتمثل لي بالintervillous space. Each septa formed of the maternal decidua covered by syncytium. هذه اللي هنا هي السنسيشيوم وتكون بداخلها اللي هي maternal decidua. So there must by syncytium separated the fetal and maternal blood. لو نشوف هذه maternal blood and this is the fetal blood والsyncytium يكون separated between them. The cotyledons are supplied by a spiral artery that force the blood and those increase the blood pressure in the intervillous space and those improving the exchange functions of the placenta. The endometrial vein drain the blood in this space. اوكي واضح. عندنا هذا السبايرال يجينا artery supplied the cotyledons that force the blood and those increase the blood pressure in the intervillous space and those improving the exchange functions of the placenta. Now, the features of the full-term placenta. A placenta expelled about 30 minutes after birth. However, much of the decidua remaining temporarily and expelled with the uterine bleeding a few days following birth. The placenta consists of the two sides, the fetal side and the maternal side, and the fetal side show the chorionic plate covered by the amnion. And contains the chorionic vessels. You can see this is the vessels in the chorionic plate converging toward the umbilical cord. The chorion in turn is covered by the amnion. The attachment of the umbilical cord is usually eccentric. You can see يعني not center, parallel. Really, the umbilical cord is attached to the chorionic plate, not to the placenta, and called the filamentous inserting cord. Chorionic plate with the blood vessels covered by the amnion. This is the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord containing to the two artery and one veins. And now the maternal side. And the maternal side show a decidual basalis with 15 to 20 bulging cotyledons, separated by grooves of the decidual septa. The intervillous space lie between the chorionic plate and the decidual plate and is filled with الماتيرنال blood. هذه الفراغات اللي هي بنصهن هي تمثل لنا الانترفيلوس سبيس filled with the maternal blood. هذا الجزء هو كليته يسمى بالكوتيليدونز and this is the decidua basalis and this is the decidua septum. The full term placenta is discoed in the shape of 15 to 25 centimeter diameters, 3 centimeter thickness, and 500 gram weight. At the end of the pregnancy, the villi show an increased fibrous tissue and thickening of the capillary basement membrane. Also, some of the villous capillaries obliterated with depositions of the fibrinoid, resulting in fractions of the some of the cotyledons that appear white in color. Thank you.